You know when you know what you need and want, but do the opposite anyway? Let's work on that. The right to exist is one of the four basic human wounds in soul alignment. It comes from something deep and old that made you ignore your needs or your potential, and it's not your fault. But how you spend your time now will shift from habits that hurt towards living the way that you want. Look, you may not even know what you want and what living the way you want even means right now because of the right to exist wound. In that case, you have the right to exist in the gap. Beating yourself up for not knowing will not grow a frequency of knowing. You have the right to get clear, even though you might keep telling yourself that if you stop moving or producing or grinding, you will fail. You might be telling yourself the opposite story, that you just can't get started with anything, you can't get off the couch. Also a right to exist wound. Part of the right to exist is the right to believing in one small step. Instead, you sell yourself out because the road is too long. What if instead you started planning the trip and packed the right gear for the journey? I love the expression, no bad weather, only the wrong clothes. The magic trick here is to become familiar with the very feeling right before you numb out and go too fast or shut down and quit. Feel that feeling. Make a distinction between the feeling and the story. On Sunday, I slept in, and at 8:30, my friend was already back from town with croissants and the espresso maker going. The sun was splashing the southern deck from over where it just like slips over the ridge and just below the roof of the deck around 6 in early summer. Last week, I ran a one-to-one retreat, and the days were full. Meditation, breakfast, walk, training, lunch, soul alignment, yoga, dinner, sauna, walk, meditation. I have a lot to catch up on after the immersion. First, I need to catch up on rest and have some time to myself. It's okay if an endeavor goes well and is exhausting. Those truths are not conflicting, and they both have the right to exist. The right to exist is one of the four basic human wounds in soul alignment. It can be obvious and external patterns in relationship and work, or show up as sneaky little ways we diminish ourselves, like punishing yourself for struggling to sleep when what you need is to be soothed. When you're tired, rest if you can. The world is full of pendulums that don't care about anything except existing off of your energy. They just want to grab you to add more weight so they can swing with more power. Write down 10 feeling words. Feelings aren't projections about the future or conversations you have with yourself. Story is different than feeling. Feelings need the space where they explode into story, and the only way to circumvent that is to become familiar with feeling. In the kitchen, my friend handed me an espresso, and immediately there was a whole story in my head about, should I have food first, or has enough time passed since waking up to drink coffee, and should I be working today? Tomorrow, I've got an excavator coming with a backhoe for the drainage ditch, and I should probably think a lot about that. I decided to drink the coffee. I overthink how I'll be perceived for using these existential meanderings to expound upon an important concept like the right to exist. I could justify my perspective, my existence to you, but that would really be justifying it to myself, and that's exactly what I'm writing about, the right to exist. And even within this exercise, there's that little voice telling me to make myself smaller, but there are big, big issues for us to address in the world, so why does this matter? It matters because small patterns in daily life are relevant to much larger challenges and dreams. Mass increases momentum. Exhaustion is one example of a pendulum, a frequency that tries to snare and drag you like a huge fishing trawler, scraping the bottom of the ocean, scooping and destroying with no care other than taking. If you've ever had trouble sleeping for an extended period of time, you've probably felt anxiety about the coming night in the middle of the day. Then you probably tried to push that feeling away, and it just got more unsettling. That is a pendulum. The right to exist is the ability to expand within your own circumference, your body. It feels like releasing pressure. It's not taking space from someone else. It's expanding within yourself. Instead of contracting and pushing back against a feeling, you create space for yourself inside. Very few people do this, and so most people are susceptible to pendulums. I poured my espresso into a small glass jar, added ice, raw milk, and walked out to the south deck outside the kitchen. The sun in Montana is a dry, full body warmth, and I became warm like the side of the house does. The roof over the deck is steep for the winter snow, and a step forward or back changes the temperature. I walk down the metal steps that are a lattice of steel spaces for the snow to slip through. I planted my feet in the grass and still thought about all the work things I could or should be doing. The jar was cold in my hand, and the coffee was good. In the tall grass just beyond the drainage ditch that we would tackle tomorrow, out towards the pasture fence in front of a section where the middle rail has cracked, a single deer was eating breakfast, maybe lunch. The grass was almost all the way dry on my feet. The ice in the jar crinkled when I walked. It was a really nice sound. The right to exist wound is presence. The wound yells that feeling means many things, but it can be an opportunity to orient yourself to your center and expand, to be here now. Feelings become intelligence with practice if you give yourself the right to exist, the right to be a beginner. We think the world needs us to know everything or we will be exposed, so we are manipulated by leaders who have no scruples and pit us against each other by convincing us to choose one way only. If you deal with your unconscious, it's hard at first. Then it's freedom. Feeling safe is something we all need. Feeling safe is the right to exist. It takes time to learn a skill, and without the right to exist, you won't take that time. If you never develop the right to exist, the same feelings will continue to be uncomfortable and propagate the same stories. Because the context is different each time, there are new things to blame. You can continue to talk yourself out of the right to exist because it requires that you have the feeling experience you've been avoiding. The unconscious remains unexperienced, and you are blindsided over and over again by your own content. Content is the unresolved baggage we carry with us from place to place in relationship to relationship. Do you see that if you push a feeling away every time by telling yourself it's wrong, that it will always be unfamiliar and you will always make yourself wrong? There's a sneaky pressure to do more when it's time to rest. I feel it. The phone sure doesn't help, showing me lots of things I should be doing. If I'm a little tired, it feels like my life is slipping away, and so I hold on and push to do more, etc., etc., etc. Since the beginning of human surviving, there has always been more to do. Maybe now is the time to do it. Maybe it's not. Maybe you can have the right to exist in the gap for a moment. In the early days of running my yoga retreats and wellness retreats around 2008, I would fantasize about multi-hour practice as soon as the guests left to catch up on everything physical I didn't do while my focus was on teaching and hosting. Sometimes I'd even feel resentful of my work instead of recognizing my right to exist in the exact situation I created, my own dream of running retreats. I thought I had to catch up with my practice. And that came from my lack of mastery of the right to exist as loved, intelligent, and empowered regardless of the pace of my physical progress. It's like I thought other people were keeping me from my progress when the real progress would be giving myself the right to exist. It seems trite, maybe related to physical practice, but the lack of right to exist seeps into all areas of life because it's an underlying wound that says you can't be as you are right now, which also means you can't make clear choices about how to grow from where you are. We get to decide what to do with our time from knowing ourselves as loved, intelligent, and empowered, instead of from an upset frequency that is like a poorly installed dimmer switch. You try to dim the lights to change the mood, and then there's that sound that can't be ignored. The grating buzz of a dimmer that was meant to mellow the vibe is the sign of an incorrect installation. When you need something and deny yourself, you are running a program that represents lack of mastery over your right to exist. Lack of mastery of the right to exist is punishing myself for being tired when, of course, I was tired. If I were to know myself as loved, intelligent, and empowered, what would I be capable of seeing or doing? Separate the story and understand the feeling. Get some rest. Get clear. And get back to work tomorrow. If you want to contribute to the world in a positive way, you have to take up space inside first. After I finished my coffee, I walked back up to the house and unwrapped the last of the butter. I heated my pan to medium and made scrambled eggs slowly, taking the pan off the heat, putting it back on and stirring. I eyed the croissants and thought of Bella and her love of baked goods and how she reminds me of the importance of Sundays. We can superimpose rhythms onto our lives for support. Rhythm is there for us even when we are alone. The rhythm of breath, heartbeat, and daylight are rhythms. And music is alchemical, like feelings are superpowers that can orient us in space and time so we can be in the right place at the right time. For many years, my schedule has been so unorthodox that I've become addicted to a misuse of my time that leaves me feeling undeserving of time with others because I haven't done what I promised myself I would do. Doing what you promised yourself you would do, keeping your word, is your own right to exist. Accepting the day for what it is your right to exist. Allowing yourself to lean into what someone else needs doesn't diminish you. I sliced a croissant down the middle and made a scrambled egg sandwich like my mom did long ago. When she discovered something I'd eat in the morning, she went all in, perfecting the execution rep by rep. I make scrambled eggs differently than she does, but without her, I probably don't learn to cook as well as I do. I take a lot of care with my food because I was lucky to be taught that making food is a central right to exist and a life language worth learning. We all have micro masteries that are examples that we can use to support our growth in other areas. When I first met with Mark, the excavator who grew up on a ranch in Colorado and started working with drainage and irrigation when he was 8 years old, I pretended to understand the technical terminology he was using because I didn't feel I had the right to exist as a grown man who didn't know those words. In my very darkest moments, I've questioned my right to exist at all. Maybe that's happened to you too. I'm here now. That's a mantra. And I gave it to a client recently as a reminder that the I am, the soul, is here always. Do you ever retract when someone reminds you to take care of yourself or when someone needs something different than you would? Those are the same. Mastery of your own right to exist. Space to feel without a whole story about the feeling will free you to take care of yourself and eventually others. I'm aware of the overpromotion of self-care and how all the selling of it can make the idea feel saccharine. Pretending things are okay while your house is on fire is not a good practice. And once an idea like self-care becomes codified as a sellable concept, it may feel less appealing, but that doesn't mean you need to deny yourself to affirm your independence. With the right to exist, rest, for example, is a ritual part of life. The right to exist dictates that you accept and see your shortcomings, not with a deflating sigh of demoralization, but with a connection to your soul energy and an empowered decision to take care without worry, to put some love into the cooking. You can be grateful for what you have and take action on behalf of others who are in need. Multiple truths have the right to exist, as we all do. The croissant egg sandwich was so good that I needed my friend to take a bite. At the end, I pressed the little fallen flakes of croissant between my fingers to get the last bites. I had just one thing on my schedule on Sunday, a session with a client who's been a great athlete and a big success in business. He's recovering from a significant injury that has left him temporarily quite limited physically. Of course he felt sadness. His sadness has the right to exist, and he has the right to exist, and thus the right to experience the natural downturn of energy while healing. As soon as he allowed himself to recognize that healing and the healing process doesn't exist only in the few square inches of an injury, but in his whole self, and that it's an opportunity to relate differently to old stories about his worth, he felt better. He told me he went from an 8 to a 3 on the irritation scale during the session, and I have a right to feel good for both of us. You have the right to exist, not only by taking up space when others encroach, but by expanding within. The places where people infringe upon us often mirror where we've learned to make ourselves small inside. And when we learn to expand invisibly, the new space organically expands the space around us. People will interact differently with us. Too often, we're told that the mind is the enemy. No. Love, expansion, and the right to exist, when those are in place, the human mind is beautiful. The problem is not the mind. It's what the mind has learned. It's having learned that we did not have the right to exist. That's what causes people to yell and fracture. Today it's Monday, and I started at 5 a.m. How you play Sunday sets you up for Monday. At 9, Mark, the excavator guy, arrived. He unloaded the backhoe from the trailer, and then we marked off the path for the ditch, taking note of the spray paint, the electric locator applied where the power lines cross from the house to the well. Now, Mark is up the hill and along the northward turn, almost behind the house, where the brow ditch will connect with a more basic flat top drain that runs all the way behind the house and the detached garage to the low pasture between my place and the neighbor who talked over my mom when I had one of the community meetings at my place. Sometimes mastery of the right to exist helps us stay quiet. Sometimes it helps us speak up. I don't always get it right. Moving on is part of the right to exist. A brow ditch is a V-shaped ditch used to divert water. Mark told me that the only sensible way to do it is to start at the low original drainage by the creek and work upwards. He worked as a roper for a long time, and you can really see it when he walks. Mark's hearing is going because he's operated big machines his whole life. When we talk out in the field, his voice echoes off the barn, and the whole neighborhood can probably hear. I got nervous that someone would try to make an issue for us, like the one guy who tried to get my well shut down out of spite, but what we're doing here is just maintenance. And I am practicing feeling the tightness when I wonder if anyone is listening and if there's going to be a problem. And that's it, I just feel it. At first, I was upset that I had to deal with the ditch and couldn't do it myself and that it would cost money. Mark explained that a brow ditch needs maintenance every few years. Around midday, we took a break over by the creek, and he asked me all about my work, and we talked about our families. His son does taekwondo, and his wife is really good with accounting. Mark climbed back into the excavator and shut the door by reaching through the window. I walked back towards the house and turned back towards the hill where he was working. It was really something to see how well he operated the machine. The right to exist is one of the 4 basic human wounds of soul alignment, and mastery is knowing how to expand inside, like a secret, like watching the sky.